Hey, Callum. Hey, if you said anything, I didn't hear it.
Hi, Robert. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Awesome.
So I wasn't sure if I had a problem on my end. Uh,
Me too.
Callum, just to confirm here,
Yep.
we're going to have a transcript of this or no?
I am recording on my end as far as it looks like there's an AI note taker there.
That's I wanted to make sure because
Okay.
that's I like to look back and make sure. I don't like to have to listen to the entire thing just to get the I can cut and paste out of those notes, and that's
Okay.
more helpful to make sure I got things exactly right.
Just to confirm, so Barry or Kim normally handles the AI and the notes, but if it's here and it's logged in, then we should be good.
Okay.
Cool.
And then
And
Robert, real quick, Rudy's not going to be on camera, just FYI.
okay, that's no problem. Yeah, no problem at all. Um, yeah, Callum, we're not taking breaks or anything, right, Callum? This is just a straight through.
I believe so. Correct.
Okay, unless Rudy needs a break.
I'll just mute myself and I'll leave y'all to it.
Okay. Hey, Rudy.
Hey, how are y'all doing?
Doing okay. How you doing?
Oh, good. Just moving around a little bit this afternoon. So, um, you know, been busy today.
Yeah. Well, so this is not going to be like the other interview. We're not going to take commercial
Okay.
breaks or anything unless you need a break for something.
Nah,
Um,
we're good.
okay. This is going to be transcribed by the AI note taker. My
Okay.
plan here is to use this, write a cover story about you. I will run this by you for fact check just to make sure
Okay.
I didn't mess
Sure.
something up. And then Kim is going to use it in one of the next two quarterly issues. So I'm not sure what the scheduled time is, but just to let you
Okay.
know what's going to happen.
Sure.
I don't know if you saw the questions I sent.
I did. Yeah. Yeah. I've had a chance to take a look at them. Looks like a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah, and we can cut it off. If it goes too long, we can cut it off. I just kind of off the top of my head thought these would be good for a kind of a personal interest profile
Sure.
of someone in your position.
Sure. No, no, I thought they were great questions.
Okay, so if you're ready, I'll kick off with the first one.
Okay.
Um, and this is not live. It's not going to be published. It's not going to be broadcast live. So if you need to restate something, just restate it. I'll catch it in the notes.
Okay. Yeah, and my team can also, if we need to tweak the transcript a bit to be a little clearer, then I think we could probably do that too. Yeah, usually Unity's good about not changing the substance of the response, just kind of cleaning it up for editorial purposes.
Okay, all right, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
All right, so I don't see why we probably couldn't do these by email. I've done interviews like this by email, but I think Kim likes the face to face.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's kick it off. So you grew up in Corpus Christi, and your grandfather worked in the refineries. Did that influence your interest in the energy sector?
Absolutely. Growing up within, a mile and a half or so of Refinery Row in Corpus Christi, that's what I knew. My grandfather actually worked for American Smelting, which is a zinc smelter, the Sarco, in Corpus Christi, about, a block away from the elementary school that I went to, St. Teresa Elementary, right there off of Lantana in Corpus Christi. So I always remember my grandfather was a laborer and eventually became a foreman at a Sarco. But he always used to tell me that I needed to go into engineering because all the bosses at the plant were engineers. And that's the extent of the advice he gave me. So when I was starting to think about what I wanted to do educational wise, engineering was kind of stuck in my head, and I was good in math and science, and it made sense. And it just kind of, with a shot in the dark, I took on electrical engineering, and I was too hard headed to change majors, so I kind of stuck with electrical engineering. But yeah, absolutely, the refinery, business and my exposure to it with my granddad had a lot to do with kind of my career trajectory.
So Kim has joined us. Kim, I've explained to Rudy, this is, we got the transcript going here. So I'm going to come in and pull a lot of stuff out of the transcript to write the story. If you want to ask anything, I think you've seen the questions and I think it covers things, but if you think of a follow-up or something you want to ask, go ahead.
Hey, Kim, how are you?
Hey, Rudy, I'm good. Thank you for doing this. We appreciate
Yeah.
this. This is a positive story, and we're going to make sure that we talk a lot about Hispanic heritage, how you're there, those things. There's been a little bit of negative stuff going on. We're not covering that at all. It's BS.
Yeah.
I don't even want to hear it because it's not, you deserve more than what you're getting.
Well, thank you.
So that's not what this is about.
And,
I
and
got
so,
you.
some of the questions I asked, you may have sort of answered them earlier. And if you did,
Okay.
you don't have to elaborate. Like you've talked about electrical engineering a little bit, and there's a question later on that. Okay, next question. What are some of your memories, your nice memories from living near the ship channel, and how did that environment shape your perspective on energy and the industry?
Well, I mean, the Corpus Christi economy is driven by the jobs along, that ship channel corridor. And, I grew up around it. So I didn't know anything different, riding bikes up and down Upriver Road, right there where all those refineries are. I practiced baseball, as a kid growing up, right at some of the parks in and around that area. So for me, that's the way my grandfather put food on our table. And, I always appreciated the jobs and the economic activity that supported. So for me, it was just kind of second nature. And I mean, we had a lot of friends whose parents worked at the refineries. I got friends and family to this day that work at the refineries. And Omar Garcia, one of my best friends over at the Port of Corpus Christi, who's a great leader down there. And so so I mean, it was just second nature. I mean, I got some great fishing holes, in and around that ship channel area and on the Nueces, Bayside. So it was just very much a part of who I was, which is cool as heck now because we recently purchased 2 plant sites down in Corpus Christi in the Nueces Bay Energy Center and over at Barney Davis. So the fact that I now own a power plant within the line of sight to the neighborhood I grew up in is really pretty cool.
So I know with me, nobody in my family ever expected me to go to college. Nobody in my family had ever been to college. What was it like for you growing up? Was that something that was expected, or was it something you decided, this is going to be the path for me?
So I grew up, my grandparents raised me. I grew up like a lot of, Hispanic kids in a multi-generational household. And my grandmother in particular was, finished at the top of her class down at La Jolla High School. Now, back in those days, women didn't go to college, when graduating in the 20s and 30s. But she expected every one of her grandchildren to go to college. So all 11 of my grandparents' grandchildren got degrees, including me. So while maybe I didn't grow up with a ton of college educated people around me, it was an expectation that everybody respected about my grandmother, and that we all did our part to earn a degree. And I'm pretty proud of that. My grandmother was an amazing lady.
That's incredible. Can you tell me about that? Tell me about your journey through the University of Texas and University of North Texas, and what motivated you to pursue the degrees that you pursued.
Yes. So, I've always drawn to UT. That's the college that I grew up kind of loving. I really had no connection to UT necessarily. But, like most Texas kids, you usually align around Texas or A&M or, one of the Texas schools. I actually had an aunt that was pushing me real hard to consider A&M, and I didn't. I actually got into Stanford. I had an uncle in California who took me on this tour of all the California schools, and I applied and ended up getting into Stanford. But I actually chose Texas because, they gave me a scholarship that covered my schooling. I got another couple of scholarships that covered books. My granddad and my dad, didn't have a ton of money, throughout college, but I had enough to pay my bills and to get by. I was kind of always a Texas guy. I'm super, and it's a huge part of who I am. I'm a huge Longhorn alumni. I've served on their college, their engineering advisory board for the College of Engineering now. I see it. I was trying to ignore it. But Texas is a big part of who I am. And I mentioned being an electrical engineer.
Hey, Rudy.
Yeah, I saw it. There you go. I just kind of fell into double E. I met with an academic advisor when I first got to UT, and asked what was the most difficult engineering program you could get into, and it was double E. So I started with double E, figuring I might have to transfer to a different engineering program if it was too hard, but I was able to make it. So it was really nothing more than that.
Yeah, I kid, because that rivalry doesn't really mean much to me. I grew up in Oklahoma and was expected to go to OU. So
oh my goodness,
the fact that I crossed the river, I was a traitor no matter what. So
well, I always told my boys, I said, I can stomach you going to A&M. If you decide to go to OU, you're on your own.
I came this close to going to UT. I did visit, and I almost went to UT, but I was a boy. I was off the farm, and A&M felt more like home than UT, with big city.
Yeah, sure.
So how did that educational background, your classes and so forth, prepare you for the challenges you face today?
Well, you really don't learn the technical, you learn the basics about, how electricity, works. Any college student will tell you, that you don't really learn what you need to know about the job that you're doing until you get in and the company that you work for teaches you. And that's pretty universal. In the energy industry, you're going to get taught what you need to know, by the company you choose to work for. I just happened to start an internship program up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area after my freshman year in college. I joined this Inroads internship program for minority students and started working for TXU. Back then it was TU Electric up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, the utility. So that's kind of how I got into the business. It was through an internship program. It kind of went from there. But college certainly, it teaches you the discipline you need, to be a lifetime, learner, right? And to this day, I'm still learning things that I need to know to be, the best CEO I can possibly be. There's no rule book or training program for being a CEO. You got to know the business, and you got to figure out what you don't know and hire people better than you smarter than you to cover, the areas that maybe you're not as strong in, and you try to put it all together. But I had a great foundation, at UT for a broad engineering, mindset. And then TXU taught me what I needed to know about the utility business. And so that foundation is really kind of what got me to where I am today.
Did you start off as an engineer, or did you go straight into the business side?
That's a really great question. A lot of people don't ask me that question. Through the way that TXU back in those days set up their internship program, they moved me around the business. So I was in a customer service role for one summer. I worked in an engineering role for a couple other summers, and they moved me back to a customer service role that last summer. I started my career off in a customer service environment, and then did engineering for, I don't know, maybe a couple, 2-3 years. I didn't spend a lot of time in the engineering discipline once I got out of school. My mentors figured out early on that I was really good with people, and they started putting me, in roles where I could take advantage, of that God-given skill set. But certainly the time I did spend in engineering, gave me the fundamentals I needed to understand the business. And again, there are a few things you got to have to be capable of being a CEO. You got to be technically sound. You don't have to be an expert, but you got to understand the basics of the business. You got to understand how business makes money. You got to understand the policy side of the business. And then, again, you don't have to be a CFO, but I have an MBA, and I finished at the top of my MBA class at UNT. So that business foundation of leadership and management is important, because you got to have a good management structure, for being a good leader. And so, so when you look at it, kind of consider it all, I think I've got a lot of really well-rounded, experience and educational background that have made this opportunity possible for me.
So you're the first Hispanic leader of CPS Energy. What does that milestone mean to you personally and professionally?
Well, I'm super proud. Being the first to do anything, there's not a lot of people get that opportunity in a lifetime. And certainly being the first Hispanic leader at CPS Energy is a honor, that's so humbling. I don't even know where to begin. It also means that I got to do a good job. It's unfortunate that it's that it took to 2022 or so, 2021, 2022 for that to happen in a community that's 65%, Latino. But it happened now. And what that means is we've kind of broken through that ceiling, and now there'll be other opportunities. It's not a thing anymore. Now, hopefully the best qualified, will get the opportunity, and that will include people of color. But it takes board members, quite frankly, in an environment where somebody like me has never been given this opportunity. It takes board members who care about, the diversity of a community, and then willing to give somebody a shot. And, Dr. Willis Mackey on our board, Janie Gonzalez on our board, my current board chair, Mayor Nurnberg, the mayor of San Antonio, they took a chance on me. And, I've done everything I can do to try to earn that opportunity and to make the community proud. And that's kind of what drives me. I don't want to be, I don't want to get to this role and then not be successful. And I know that because when I go to schools and see kids, and I go to, into the business community and see the elderly, and folks in the community, they react to me in a way that makes me feel pretty proud, and I can't tell you, I didn't think that it was ever possible for me to be a CEO growing up, because I never saw a CEO that looked like me,
Yeah.
So, and that's why it's important, and at the end of the day, it's not about me. It's about what my opportunity means for, the people of color and kids, who are trying to aspire to do great things. Now, at least they have a role model to say, hey, somebody's gotten there.
So in my experience, every CEO that comes in wants to put their, stamp on the job. What are some of the initiatives you implemented at CPS Energy? How did you make that your job?
Yeah, the first initiative was stabilizing ourselves financially. We were in a really tough spot after Winter Storm Uri. And, you know, that's kind of how this opportunity came about. We had trust issues with the community. And so, you know, I immediately got to work trying to stabilize the organization, which, you know, I think we got done pretty quick. I mean, we got a rate case passed through our board and city council. That was the first time that had happened in 9 years. That's kind of become my forte, is trying to get those processes through the regulatory, you know, structure. You know, but once we got kind of stabilized in that regard, you know, we put a strategy together. Our Vision 2027, you know, really was a means for us to prioritize, you know, billions of dollars worth of investment that we have to make to get us from where we have been in the past to where we need to be in the future. That means, you know, additional gas supply infrastructure that we kind of ignored for a while. We're in the process of getting new pipelines built to get gas to, you know, into our system that we need to generate power and to serve, you know, our gas distribution utility customers. You know, we got transmission to build. I've got, you know, over $1 billion of transmission I've got to get built to interconnect our system, you know, to deal with the growth that we've had in San Antonio, which has been phenomenal. I got to retire old gas power plants and build new power plants to replace them. And I got to manage an energy transition that we're right in the middle of, that kind of gets us from an old style utility into the future. And it started with creation of Vision 2027. Once you have a good strategy, then, you know, it's up to you to execute. And then that's where we are right now. We're executing our Vision 2027 strategy probably ahead of schedule. And I'm really, really proud of my team and the community for getting behind us on it.
So I think that mostly answers the next question about challenges you're going to face in the next 5 years and what your priorities are. One of the things I wanted to ask about, though, you know, I write utility forecaster, and one of the things that is the dominant theme is the growth of AI data centers and how that's going to affect power. Is that something you see in your area, and is that something you're planning for?
Absolutely. We've got probably 10 data centers in San Antonio right now, and probably another 10 or 12 waiting in the wings trying to get in to San Antonio. You know, my job for whoever shows up to my doorstep is to provide them service. But with these larger loads, it's a little bit more complex. We're going to have to build transmission in a lot of instances to be able to serve these customers. And the minute you have to do that, it brings in the Public Utility Commission of Texas and a state regulatory process that takes 3 to 5 years. So, you know, so there's probably some customers that are a bit frustrated right now because of the time horizon that it takes to get them the service that they're looking for. But I feel good that we've planned for that on the generation side. We just can't build transmission fast enough to get them service immediately. But I feel good that we will figure it out. I've got an obligation to serve whoever shows up to my doorstep. And so we're working with those folks right now, but it's certainly, you know, because here's what's happened. It's a perfect storm for that type of customer right now. We're retiring old gas plants. We got to reconnect our transmission infrastructure differently, because every time you retire an old gas plant, you have to reconnect your transmission system around that hole in your supply, system to make up for it. So we're trying to do that. We're in the largest growth community in the country right now. And then you layer on these really large loads on top of what's already the largest growth in the country. It's creating some really difficult technical challenges for us, but I've got a great team, and we're going to figure it out.
So the next question, that question kind of relates more to my sixth question. I'm going to back up and catch 5 after this, but you know, you talked a lot about the challenges going ahead here. How is the the adoption of renewables and sustainability play into all that? I mean, it seems like that's yet another complication in your job with trying to integrate all that into the grid.
Well, here's the deal. I don't subscribe to the notion that renewables are bad and, you know, gas is good, and you got to stop, you know, the influx of renewables that are creating problems. We're behind the 8 ball as a state right now. We've got the growth that we've seen, which is a great thing. The only way you're going to serve it right now is with renewables. So we're number 1 in solar, we're number 2 in wind in the state of Texas. And we're the fourth largest generator, of dispatchable gas, nuclear, coal, power, as well. So we've figured out a way to do it all and do it all successfully, as has the state. It's a great thing that you're seeing wind development in areas where it's created, economic opportunity for farmers and ranchers that, may have struggled, quite frankly, in the past. The solar revolution, we're getting solar built and it's getting built quickly. We got batteries coming in right behind that, which we're very bullish on, and we'll be building a gigawatt worth of battery storage over the next 4 or 5 years. So you got to have all resources when you're in a constrained environment. Do we need natural gas generators? Absolutely. We got to build more of that too. But you got to get in line for the supply chain, materials wise, to get those done, and it's going to take a little while. So we will get there. Yes, when you have intermittent resources as part of your system, it does create some challenges that you've got to kind of factor in to your engineering process, but it's all manageable. And when you're in a growing state, you got to have it all. You don't have the luxury of picking and choosing what type of resource you can get. You got to have as much resources as you can get on the system. ERCOT's already talking about going from 86 gigawatts of peak to over 150 over the next 5 to 10 years, however that growth shows up. That's a phenomenal amount of growth. So right now we don't have the luxury of picking and choosing what type of resources we build. We got to have it all.
All of the above. Yep. So shifting gears a little bit, what advice would you give to young professionals, especially those from underrepresented communities looking to enter the energy industry?
Well, I don't think there's a better time to be in the energy industry. We've got, I've hired 1,200 new employees over the last 3 years, which is a third of my employee base. I got 40% of my employees over the next 5 years that are eligible to retire. Think about that. That's 70 to 75% of my employee base will turn over a 8 to 10 year period. And all that means is there's going to be a ton of opportunity, for new kids coming out of school that are looking for a career. And a career in the energy industry, you're gonna have a stable, source of income to feed your family and to do the things you love, for your entire life. You might not, make a gazillion dollars in the utility industry, but you know what? You're gonna get paid pretty good, and everybody in the world needs your product. So I think that the utility sector is a great place for young folks to be. I always tell my new employees, it's not rocket science. You got to show up to work every day. You got to show up with a good attitude and treat people right. You got to be inquisitive and figure out what kind of leader, you're going to be, whether you're an individual contributor or you're a leader of people. Either way, it takes leadership, and so there's some fundamentals that you got to get right. And then, and then we'll do the rest, and it all leads to the possibility that somebody could end up in my seat, someday, that's not even thinking they could be a CEO. I really didn't even think about the possibility that I could be a CEO until about 8 years ago, when Doyle Beneby, one of our former CEOs, put the idea in my head that I was capable.
Like where were you at that point in your career?
At that point in my career, I was vice president of external relations.
Okay, so you were close. You were close anyway. I
was close, but again, nobody had ever actually put that thought in my head. Nobody had ever, had a mentoring conversation with me that said, "Hey, Rudy, you can do this." And the minute he opened that door for me, like my dream changed. My concept of what I thought was possible, grew exponentially. I always thought I'd have to leave CPS Energy to maybe go be a CEO of a smaller utility, maybe a co-op, and then maybe I could come back. But the good Lord blessed me with an opportunity. I was the right guy at the right time. The organization needed my particular skill set based on where we were in the moment. And, my team and I have come in and done our best to be successful, which I think we've been hugely successful over the course of the 3 years or so that I've now, been doing this. So again, having somebody tell you it's possible. Yeah, I can't underscore how significant that was for me.
So next question, I've got it written as two questions, but I'm going to ask it as a single question. And that's, how does CPS Energy ensure you meet the needs and expectations of your customers and the community? And what role do you play in the economic development of the community?
Well, I'll take the second question first. Nothing happens in San Antonio without CPS Energy. You know, you can't build a home, you can't start a business. Nothing happens without the utilities being the best they can be. So I never understood the idea of people actually pulling for CPS Energy not to be successful, because we're owned at the end of the day by our customers. So economic development doesn't happen without a good supply of energy and a good supply of water. You know, the job Robert Puente does over at San Antonio Water System, equally important, you know, to economic development in San Antonio. You got to have water, you got to have energy. The way that we remain successful, which is kind of the pivot that I focused on when I became CEO, is you have to be willing to engage your customers, engage your community, and listen to what it is that they want. I know exactly what my customers want because I'm out in the community every day talking to somebody about, you know, the job that we're doing. They want power and their gas, you know, service to be reliable, and they want it to be affordable. And then they want us to be innovative and to be sustainably minded. So I've got to reduce carbon, but I can't do that at the expense of reliability or affordability. You know, so I got to find a way to stay in balance and achieve all those in a time horizon that allows us to continue to meet the growth of the community. But for a publicly owned utility like us, which we're the largest electric and gas utility in the United States combined, you know, where the rubber meets the road is ensuring that we are always paying attention to our customers' expectations. I don't need to be the best utility in the world. If we're doing the right things, I'll give myself a chance to be that, you know, but that doesn't do you any good if your customers hate you. And so so the work that I do is right here in San Antonio. I'm out, you know, I want my customers, you know, to feel good about the job that we're doing and whatever other accolades come, you know, but fundamentally, you know, the reason we exist is to be the best electric and gas utility we can be for San Antonio. That's what, you know, that's what drives me. I just want my customers to look me in the eye and say, Rudy, I think you're doing a good job. You know, that's what's important to me.
So what trends do you foresee having the most significant impact on the energy industry over the next decade, and how are community-owned utilities evolving in response to these trends?
Well, the utility industry isn't by nature, you know, super innovative. You know, I mean, Thomas Edison come back and still recognize the system that he invented. So we gotta partner with organizations that are good at innovation, like the Electric Power and Reliability Institute, EPRI. That's an organization that is thinking about the future and how we evolve our system, you know, into the future. But you do have to make some investments. You know, right now, you know, primarily in Texas, it's gas generation. You know, of course, you got renewables. Of course, you got battery storage coming. You really can't generate with coal. You're really not going to build a lot of new nuclear, although you might build some small modular nuclear. But baseload nuclear is super expensive. So how are we going to make geothermal work? You know, how are we going to do pumped hydro and the hydrogen economy? The hydrogen economy in Texas, I think, has a ton of potential. Probably more so for the petrochemical industry, you know, that needs all kinds of hydrogen byproducts. But you got a pipeline system that you can move hydrogen around, you know, today. And so I think hydrogen is going to play a big role in the future. So we have, you know, the only way you get there is to pick technologies that you think have a chance of getting there at the scale that we need them to be for a big utility like CPS Energy. You know, a 1 megawatt's not going to make a difference. I need technology that's going to give me 100 megawatts or 1,000 megawatts. But you have to make investments somewhat speculatively on the technology you think have a chance, because that's the only way it's going to get there, by actually investing in it. And I think we're doing a good job of that. You know, we've picked partners like Southwest Research Institute in San Antonio, UTSA. They're all doing research for us that I think will make some of these new technologies actually help us get to the future sooner rather than later. But again, when you're in a transition, you know, state that the utility industry is right now, You either let change happen to you or you go make it happen. And at CPS Energy, we're going to make the future happen. There's no doubt about it. We're going to be proactive. We're going to invest thoughtfully, but in a meaningful way. And we're going to create the future that our customers demand of us.
So who or what has been the most significant influence on your leadership style, and how has that shaped your approach?
I just had this conversation with a young employee that pinged me about this. So I've always been pretty good at developing mentoring relationships with leaders at the highest levels. And every leader, has things about them that are really, really good that you want to emulate, and probably some things about them that you don't want to emulate. And that's okay. I mean, I'm sure people would say there are things they love about me, and there may be some other things they don't care for as much. But every leader, I've been able to take certain elements of their leadership style and create my own leadership accountability, profile. So for me, I want to be a humble leader. I don't ever want it to be about me. I want it to be about the people that I'm responsible for. I want to be, approachable. I want to feel like, my role is no more or less important than any other role in our company. I want our community to feel like they can get to me if they need me. And all of that has come through different leaders that I've been exposed to over the course of my career, that have taught me, what good leadership looks like from their perspective. Leaders like Dole Beneby, leaders like, Paula Gold Williams, leaders like former Mayor Joe Adame down in Corpus Christi that I worked with when I was at the city of Corpus Christi for a small stint. One of the most humble Christian men I've ever known. A lot of what he was is what I've tried to be. They're leaders when I worked at the state capitol, like Kurt Seidlitz, who was a former state affairs chairman and was my boss when I was at TXU once upon a time. He taught me, how to have a people strategy. So if you're paying attention and you're asking the right questions, your journey through your career should be a culmination of all those mentors that have had a hand in making you who you are. And I like to think that the leader that I am today is because I've paid attention to the advice that all those people have given me over the course of my career.
So what are some of those important qualities that you consider in a successful leader?
Well, again, I mean, I'm a leader that expects humility out of my team. I don't ever want it to be about them. Shouldn't be about us. It should be about the people that we serve, from a leadership standpoint. We have to be open to criticism. In other words, I have this analogy that when my leaders and I are in the room, we're like the Knights of the Round Table. There's no head, there's no, tail. We're all equal in that room, and everybody has the ability to bring their perspectives and their ideas to the table. And guess what? They don't have to agree with mine. In fact, if my leaders aren't telling me the things I need to hear, not the things I want to hear, then they're not doing their jobs, that allow us to be the best we can be. I want our leaders to follow through on their commitments. That's hugely important to me, especially when employees don't understand our strategy and they come to us asking us questions about why we're doing certain things. If we don't get back to them in a timely manner, if we're not answering those questions right, then how are they ever gonna come along and get aligned to what it is we're trying to accomplish? So that approachability and that kind of servant attitude is hugely important, to what I want, my leadership team to be at CPS Energy. And I think by and large, we're doing a good job being an accountable leader, leading with integrity, being transparent in why we're doing the things that we're doing. All those things are aspects of our core values that it's not just about what we do on a daily basis. It's also got to be about how we're doing it.
Yeah, integrity is something I always tell people. If you got integrity, everything else kind of falls into place. I mean, you do the right thing. I want to ask about how you balance the demands of your job with personal family life. I mean, what's a day like in your life?
Well, I probably work, 40 to 60 hours just Monday through Thursday. I'm up at it early in the morning. If I've got to see my crews, I got to be at the centers by 6:30 to catch them before they get out. Usually I've got some evening reception or dinner or something, just doing the business of the CEO. So I go pretty hard, and that's why for every CEO, there's a beginning and an end. Eventually, CEOs are going to get burned out because nobody can kind of keep that pace. But I learned from Doyle actually early on in my career that work-life balance, it's not his job to ensure that my work-life balance is right. That's my job to ensure that my work-life balance is right. So there are a few things that I do at CPS Energy that I try to hold my leaders accountable to. I try really hard to not bother my employees when they should be having dinner with their families in the evening. Well, maybe one off, you're texting and you have a conversation about some emergency or something that's going on. That's in the utility business, that's normal. We're 24/7 operation, but you should be able to work efficiently enough during the day to not bother people in the evenings when they should be with their families. I don't bother people on weekends, if I can help it. Yes, I'm working a lot. Typically, I'm at an event or I'm speaking somewhere or I'm dealing with politicians or I'm doing something that a CEO is responsible for doing. But I want my people to be I don't want them missing games of their kids. I don't want them missing school programs. And if our meeting culture is right and we're being efficient about how we go about, utilizing our time, then we shouldn't need to bother people in the evenings. But at the end of the day, it's the leader's job to create an environment where work-life balance is possible. But at the end of the day, I can't keep somebody from working 20 hours a day if they're just wired that way, But so part of it is individual accountability of knowing when to shut it off, and the other part is the managerial accountability of creating an environment that respects people's private time.
Okay, that was my list of prepared questions. Kim might have something, but I also wanted to ask you. There was a Supreme Court case that got overturned, Chevron deference. If you don't have any comments on it, that's fine. But I'm just wondering if you guys have looked and seen how that might affect you.
Well, there is a ton of regulatory pressure that we're feeling in all kinds of ways. I mean, I think the EPA's power plant rule already got set aside, or at least stayed, while the ramifications of the Supreme Court case are coming out. I agree with the Supreme Court. I do think that regulatory agencies only extract the authority that should be granted to them by either the president or or Congress. I think that but here's the funny thing: when you're in a situation where your congressional process is dysfunctional, right? I mean, most of our Congress people don't agree today is Tuesday, right? At the end of the day, so when you're not getting direction from the political process, regulatory agencies have no choice but to make their own decisions about things. So the dysfunction of the federal process is what's led us here. And when that happens, sometimes the judiciary has to step in and help them figure out where those boundaries are. And I think that's what they've done.
Okay. So I don't know that I'll use that, but I just was curious. I've been hearing.
I have no issue with you using that. I tell Congress people to their face how dysfunctional, I think Congress is right now. So I got no issue with you using that if you think it adds to the story.
Okay. Kim, did you have any questions?
I do. So Rudy, just one thing struck me, and again, it goes more off of what you said really struck me very deeply when you said you had never really thought about your pathway to being the CEO until somebody mentored you. And, we are working closely, and you don't know this, but you'll be getting a letter from me soon. I want to bring Hispanics and energy here. I've talked to Omar, he's in. I've got a few other, I'd like you're in to bring it.
Absolutely.
To have a chapter here, because we need it. And I need you a board member for Jose to say yes.
Sure.
But saying that, mentoring is vital. And when I look at the stats and the numbers of Hispanics and energy and how low they are, this book, this is the chemical book of just one region. Shocking to me. Look, I mean, you can look at it, it's pretty thick.
You're frozen on my screen, Kim. I don't.
You're freezing up on mine too.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a book that I have, just one. and it's the Association of Chemical Industry of Texas. I've gone through this book. You can see how tiny they are. The amount of Hispanics in here are mind-boggling. There's none. And any leadership, you know, and so our work is done, but our work needs to get done here because they're just not, they're so underrepresented in the energy sector, high-paying jobs, you know, good education jobs. So my question though is the mentoring. When you got mentored at your age, despite that you were vice president of external affairs for CPS for all those years, and it took somebody higher up to mentor you. My question is, does CPS have embedded in it some form of mentoring in it? And how much of
Absolutely.
your time? You might not have any time, I get it, but you know,
No.
how
So,
important is
yeah,
mentoring in the CPS culture?
it's immensely important. We've got multiple mentoring programs that exist that pair people up, you know, to ensure that we're paying attention to the young talent at CPS Energy. But you know, I'm a product of successful mentoring programs, and that is fundamental to our leadership training, you know, program at CPS Energy. So you know, we have employee affinity groups that have their mentoring programs. We got formal mentoring programs that our HR, you know, our people and culture team manage for us. So we have formal and informal mentoring programs. I'm constantly looking for that spark in somebody that tells me that there's somebody that can do, you know, bigger things. That somebody, you know, that you know, I mean, I always, you know, I got 3,600 employees, and in every room, it's a sea of, our colors are blue and orange, right? But every room is a sea of blue. But there are people that I see in orange that are superimposed because of how inquisitive they are, or how positive they are, or how, you know, how committed they are to, you know, to helping us achieve, you know, our goals. They just stand out, you know, and you got to find a way, you know, to kind of wrap your arms around people like that and help them along, you know, to achieve, you know, I mean, I think I'd love, you know, to put my diversity stats up against any other, you know, energy company in America, quite frankly, because I got Latino VPs all over the place, you know, and I'm super proud of that. Most of my leadership team are women. Super proud of that. Now I got to work on African American leaders, you know, and find a way, you know, to hire, you know, more African American leaders. I got to find a way, you know, to bring Latinas along. You know, probably underrepresented, you know, to a certain degree on the Latina side. But I'm a leader who cares about that. Not all leaders care about that, Kim. And that's why when you look at books like you're looking, you know, if you're not thinking about it, then you're going to continue to follow the same, you know, cookie cutter approach that most energy companies follow. When I was a young engineer at TXU back in the day, I thought you had to be a 6'5" Anglo male to be a leader at that utility, because that's the only leaders that we had. So of course I wouldn't dream to be, you know, that I could get there, because I didn't think it was possible, right? So and it takes leaders wanting to be a reflection of their community and going out and doing something about, you know, developing people in a way that gives everybody the same chance, you know, to be successful. That's what's important about mentoring programs, is that's how you mine for that goal. You know, I mean, that it's a mining process. You're mining for talent, trying to figure out who stands out and who's the most capable. You know, and you know, and when I look at my priorities on a daily basis, interacting with my employees is absolutely at the top of the list. Interacting with the community is 1A, but I'm talking to employees somewhere in some part of the organization every single day. I make that a priority for me, because that's how I help people develop. They got to get inside my head and know how I think about things.
I did want to give you a compliment on your city. I had to give a talk there 6 or 7 years ago. I don't know if Dominique is listening in. My wife is a Ramos, and she grew up in California. And she said it's kind of an uncommon name out there. But when we went to San Antonio, she said, man, this feels like home to me. The food and the culture and everything. She can't wait to go back. We haven't gotten to go back yet, but you know, I think San Antonio, Austin are two best cities in Texas. And if we were to move back there,
Robert, you need to get a speaking gig out here. Well, so just then to reiterate, you do have formal mentoring programs that are embedded into CPS to
Absolutely.
the culture.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Because, there's a lot of great mentoring for the woman, and then of course, woman Hispanic, and I'm kind of thinking on that, it takes a lot of not just one or two, hey, good pat on the back. I mean, literally you have to mentor a woman on, how to act in the workforce, how to talk, how to, represent yourself, where do you want to go? And so it's like it's a track. It's not just a pat on the back. And to see this was mind-boggling. And I mean, this is ExxonMobil, this is Air Liquide, this is Alcoa.
Right.
Everything is in here, and it's just the numbers are very telling to how far women have gotten further. African Americans, Hispanics are at the very bottom of the food chain, energy. So we need to change that. But I did want to make sure that we, understood that you have mentoring embedded in
Yes, ma'am.
CPS to help them climb that ladder and help in that area. That's the only
Yes,
question
ma'am.
I have. And then, I have to take I have to do the interview with Jim Wright next, guys, which you don't, Robert, but I
Well,
have to interview Jim.
please tell the
Robert.
commissioner that I send my regards. He is one of my favorite politicians in all of Texas.
I love him too.
Yeah.
I love him too. Well, good story,
All right.
Rudy. And
Yes,
the
ma'am.
next thing we need,
Yeah, before you got on, I was saying, I'm not sure which issue we're targeting here with this.
it'll be the second one. And so we have time, Rudy. I don't know how your time is, but I know your team told me that they were going to get me a high res.
Okay. Yeah. Dominique will be able
Got
to
it.
take care of that for y'all.
Yes,
Kim,
I
I
can
won't
get that
step
for you.
on, I won't step on the cover story here, but Rudy said some things that might be worthwhile to quote him in Forbes at some point. I will save that for later on. I think, Rudy, I write for Forbes as well. I'm the
Yes,
energy
sir.
contributor there. So there was some things you said there that might be kind of timeless but worth quoting there at some point, but not before the cover story comes out, Kim.
You can do it, and we can reference back to it if you want to run it on this.
Oh, I'm going to look
Yeah.
at this and I'm going to listen to our earlier interview again and see, because there's a lot of things. I mean, the AI data center thing has been everybody is just peppering me with questions on that. How are we ever going to meet the energy demand from all these data centers? And you said some things there, I think, that are worthwhile. The comments on the Chevron deference case, I've been asked to write a story on that, but I've been thinking, well, do I have enough really? Do I understand this well enough? RBN Energy put something out, and I was trying to read through that and understand it. But that may be worthwhile as well.
Okay. Well, we'll work with the team, and we'll help. We'll do whatever we can to help y'all.
If just one thing, Robert, I can say, I really think, and again, this is just personally me, to understand that he's right. San Antonio is nothing but Hispanics, and we're proud, but we're underrepresented. The fact that he's finally there in this, large utility. If you do write on it, I would only ask that you reference that, because I think it's so important for us to keep, mentoring. You can go where you want to go if you desire to go there. And he's a great role model for that. That's all I would ask. If you can squeeze it in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you
y'all very
guys.
much. Absolutely.
I'm off to my.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Rudy.
Appreciate it. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank y'all.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Robert, if you want to just send me an email, I can put that in the chat here on what you need from us, like his picture that you need. And then I know you mentioned that you're going to be sending the transcript of this to help you write it, and you were going to send it over for the approval. So if you want to copy me on that as well, that'll be great, so I can get that moving quickly for you.
Have you been on the email chains already?
I have not. No, I just got put on this. So it'll be a new email for you.
Okay, so that was D Ramos, right? D Ramos.
Yes, D Ramos at CPS Energy.
CPS Energy.
Yes.
That is Dominique. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
I was on the email chain for the last interview, but not this one.
Well, if you were on the last one, you probably pop up there in my emails then.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much, and let me know if you need anything else.
Okay, you bet. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.